From geography to history, plants and animals, science, and so much more, this is Mike Butler, and welcome to This Day's Trivia from Bison Podcasts. Each episode, we dive into 5 unique trivia topics, all tied to today's date, and our trusty randomizer wheel will pick one of those topics for the episode. Get ready for 16 fast-paced trivia questions with just 5 seconds between each question. Perfect for testing your knowledge solo or with friends and family. At home or on your next road trip. So buckle up. It's time for this day's trivia. Today is September 30th. Get out your pen and paper to tally up your score. It's time for this day's trivia. Here we go. Topic number 1, September 30th is International Blasphemy Rights Day, commemorating the publishing of the 12 cartoons on September 30th, 2005 in a Danish newspaper that angered many religious believers around the world, many of whom expressed their anger through violent protests, riots, and murder. Founded by the Center for Inquiry in 2009, the group believes, quote, observing International Blasphemy Rights Day is a way of showing opposition to any resolutions or laws, binding or otherwise, which discourage or inhibit freedom of speech of any kind. Topic number 2. Happy Independence Day to Botswana. Known as Botswana Day, September 30th celebrates a United Nations agreement that resulted in Botswana's independence on this date in 1966. Speeches on this day in Botswana are often focused on the youth, urging them to stay in good health and work toward a more prosperous Botswana. Topic number 3, September 30th marks the birthday of famous German silent film actress Lil Dagover. Born to Dutch parents in 1887 in the Dutch East Indies, the land now referred to as Indonesia, living in England, France, Switzerland, and eventually settling in Germany, her career spanned many decades, from the silent era up until shortly before her death in 1980 at the age of 92. Most famous for her silent roles of the 1920s, she starred in many classics including The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari in 1920. One of my favorite movies personally, and also one of the most important films of the German Expressionist movement. Topic number 4, September 30th, 1949 marks the official end of the Berlin Airlift, a crucial event in the early days of the Cold War. The year prior, the Soviet Union blocked ground traffic into West Berlin, resulting in the people of West Berlin going without food, clothing, and medical supplies. So, for the next 15 months after the Soviet Union's decision, primarily U.S. pilots and planes brought supplies into West Berlin, amazingly without any escalating violence. The Soviet blockade officially ended in May of 1949, with several more months of airlifts of supplies being necessary until the economy recovered. Topic number 5, September 30th is Orange Shirt Day in Canada, a solemn day of remembrance acknowledging the atrocities and ongoing generational trauma connected with the Canadian Indian residential school system. Beginning in the 1800s, the Canadian government implemented policies that forced Indigenous children to attend these schools, often taking them from their families and communities. In these institutions, children were subjugated to harsh conditions, forced to abandon their cultures, and forbidden from speaking their Indigenous languages. Today's topic will be Orange Shirt Day and compulsory residential schooling for Indigenous peoples in Canada. This is a serious topic for today, and as a heads up, may be very painful for some to learn about. Question number 1. Residential schools in our context today refers to the extensive school system set up by the Canadian government, administered by Christian churches that forced Indigenous children into Euro-Canadian and Christian ways of living. My question to you is, was Canada the only country to create such schools? Answer: absolutely not. It has happened all over the world to many subjugated peoples, including in the United States. Another phrase to look up is the stolen generation, labeling similar practices in the country of Australia. Question number 2, 1876, the Indian Act is enacted in Canada, establishing a framework for controlling Indigenous peoples. The Act paved the way for the creation of residential schools. The Act had a major impact on First Nation cultures, economies, and politics, causing intergenerational trauma primarily around residential schools. For the point, answer true or false. The Indian Act is still in force today. Answer true. The same act that ushered in some of the darkest moments of Canada's history is kept alive with amendments, having been amended many times over the years to remove restrictive and oppressive laws. Question number 3, in 1920, the Indian Act is amended, making school attendance compulsory for Indigenous children ages 7 to 15. True or false, Indigenous children still had the choice to attend other educational institutions outside of these residential schools. Answer: false. It was illegal for them to attend any other schools. Question number 4, by the 1950s, efforts to quote-unquote civilize Indigenous cultures of Canada and convert them to Christianity using residential schools began to wane. However, things did not get easier for Indigenous peoples right away, by any means. What alliterative two-word phrase refers to a period starting in the 1960s which saw a systemic removal of First Nations children from their families without consent, placing these children into state care? Answer: this period is often referred to as the 60s scoop. Issues around overrepresentation of First Nation children in the child welfare system continue to this day. Question number 5. In 1970, a group called the National Indian Brotherhood formed a single cohesive lobby group, fighting for the Indigenous rights, including the closure of residential schools. This group restructured in 1982 and became what group that is still very active today in fighting for Indigenous rights? Answer: the Assembly of First Nations. Question number 6, true or false? The Canadian government operated Indian residential schools in partnership solely with the Catholic Church. Answer: false. They also partnered with Anglican, Methodist, and Presbyterian churches, among others. The Canadian government was financially responsible for these schools. Question number 7. Indian residential schools operated in all Canadian provinces and territories except for 3. For the point, name at least one of these 3. Answer: the 3 provinces void of residential schools were Prince Edward Island, New Brunswick, and Newfoundland. Question number 8. Operating for a period of time spanning 13 decades, the last Indian residential school closed in what year in the 1990s? Answer: 1996, although some sources put the last official closing in 1997 and some even in 1998. According to the Canadian Encyclopedia, quote, the last residential school closed in 1996. Grolier Hall, which closed in 1997, was not a state-run residential school in that year. Question number 9. In 2013, at a reunion for the St. Joseph Mission School, a woman named Phyllis Jack Webstad shared her first memory of her experiences at this residential school. And because of her story, the Orange Shirt Day was born. What happened to Phyllis Jack Webstad when she was just 6 years old on her first day at the mission school in 1973, which eventually led to the creation of Orange Shirt Day? Answer: Her clothes were taken away from her, including a brand new orange shirt that was given to her by her grandmother. Question number 10. In 2008, a formal apology was given on behalf of Canadians for the Indian residential school system, which separated over 150,000 Indigenous children from their families and communities. What Canadian Prime Minister issued this formal apology? Answer: Stephen Harper. Question number 11. The Indian Residential School System Settlement Agreement, Canada's largest class action settlement in its history, began to be implemented in 2007. With it came the formation of what commission that helps facilitate reconciliation among former students, their families, and their communities? Answer: the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Question number 12. The federal government of Canada officially declared September 30th as a statutory holiday in 2021. While coinciding with Orange Shirt Day, what did the government decide to name this holiday? Use the previous question as a hint. Answer: it is officially Canada's National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. Question number 13. 2021 also marks the year of international media coverage regarding the discovery of hundreds of what at various former residential school sites, amplifying the calls for justice, accountability, and healing. Answer: unmarked graves. At these schools, thousands of Indigenous children died from neglect, abuse, and disease, often without proper documentation or acknowledgement of their existence. Question number 14. Among the coverage that year, 2021, of this issue was Prime Minister Justin Trudeau visiting a former residential school in Saskatchewan, where he visited the 741 unmarked graves on that site. In the photo coverage of this event, Trudeau was photographed wearing what on his lapel? Answer: a pin of an orange shirt. Question number 15. Coverage also had Trudeau photographed at this same event, placing what common plush children's toy at a small flag marking one of the 751 unmarked graves? Answer: a teddy bear. Tying in the topic of last episode's round of questions, the Sami people in Europe shared a similar history to the First Nations of Canada, both having faced attempts by Christian missionaries to erase their practices and identities through church-run schools. In recent years, influenced by the spotlight on Canada's past atrocities, which Scandinavian countries are confronting their own colonial reckoning regarding injustices committed against the Sami? Answer: Sweden, Norway, and Finland. There is also a population of Sami in Russia. This was a rather serious subject today. I appreciate you all for hanging on and paying attention to this important topic. Many atrocities too horrible to mention on this podcast took place at these residential schools. I encourage anyone interested to check out the sources I used for today's episode, which are available on our Patreon page. I will make today's transcript and sources available to free members. If you don't feel like joining our Patreon, then please email me for today's sources. thisdaystrivia@gmail.com. If you'd like to donate to the Orange Shirt Legacy Fund, go to the official Orange Shirt Society website, orangeshirtday.org. That's all we have for today, but make sure to tune in every Monday, Wednesday, Friday for new episodes and new topics. Interested in ad-free episodes, bonus content, transcripts, and my sources for deeper dives into the topics? Looking for archived material from my previous podcasts, Get the Word, and the English sessions? Go over to patreon.com/Bison Podcast Studios and give us just $1 single for all of it. Patreon.com/Bison Podcast Studios. That's patreon.com/Bison Podcast Studios. Until next time, this is Mike signing off.